Hi everybody, this is Tom the Culture Chap. So today I'm bringing you a play called Ravenscroft. It's a few years old, I think it was done in the 90s, and it is a tremendous murder mystery investigation. Now, unlike a lot of murder mystery plays, in this one you don't get to see the death. Let me explain. I have some additions to Ravenscroft I'd like to put forward with the way I directed it two different times, which of course these things are genius, and I'm just sharing them with you. Um, Ravenscroft is well done, but often in reviews you see people criticize it because it has a boring first act and it has a completely insane second act. This is the case with a lot of plays and musicals. The first act is not as good, it's a lot of exposition, and in Ravenscroft, it is set in 1905. A murder has already happened, and it's five women talking to an investigator. And they're basically locked in a room. Now, being locked in a room is not the point of it, it is just they never leave the room, which, as you're already thinking, might get tedious, um, despite however good the actors are. And I think that a couple of things should happen. So, the five women are Mrs. Ravenscroft, her daughter, Gillian, her daughter's governess, an Austrian woman named Marcy, Dolly, the maid, the terrified, not so very bright maid, and Mrs. French, the cook. So, and Mr. Ruffing, the investigator. Now, the idea of the first act is that how easily each of these women lie to the investigator. That's the interesting part of it. But since it's no exits, no entrances, no extra characters, and any first act could feel long because it's just wordplay. It's written very well, but I think you should add to it. Okay, so being a fan of Edwin Drood and how they talk to the audience, and being a fan of other plays that are older that maybe need a bit of narration or a bit of time and place set by someone speaking to the audience before the show. A lot of people are against this. They feel that shows should stand on their own, and that might be great. This one might need some help because there are just a few too many reviews that say boring first act, incredible second act. And I don't mean one or two, I mean like 5 or 6 to 7 reviews that say the same thing. So here's what we did. Sort of two different styles. So in Edwin Drood, a different person speaks to the audience and asks for an ending. Here's what I'm proposing. A different woman in character comes to speak to the audience and introduce the show and just tell them the truth. Like, oh, if you've come to this show, you're a discerning person and you know what you're getting into. But some critics and people have said the show is tedious and the first act is dragging, and of course it's not because we're all brilliant. This person has to be in character. And choose a different character every night to introduce the play. And so what we did, what we found was the common denominator was you're so disappointed that you've come to a murder mystery and it's just about the investigation and you don't get to see the murder or the victim. So we've decided to do it for you. Now, there's also a ghost in the play, but the ghost doesn't get much attention. The person who gets the most attention is the victim, what's his name? Patrick Rourke. And this is true. This is the way this is written. Patrick gets discussed a lot. And it's almost a disappointment that you never get to see the character. And I'm saying see the character. I'm also saying that when we did this, we didn't see a need for the whole set. The set is just a drawing room, a parlor. It's got interesting chairs, interesting props. It's got to be an interesting room because you never leave that set. And the thing about Patrick is that he falls down or was pushed down a stairs. Now, some companies, they make a beautiful stairwell, and that's great. A beautiful, grand, sweeping staircase, and that's wonderful. But if you choose not to do that, just say that with the narrator or the person introducing the show. Say, now, if we wanted to charge you $200 or £200 a ticket, we would have built a stairwell and thrown an actor down the stairs. But we didn't. So we're just going to have to imagine that, and we're going to do a bit of a blackout. So they go into a blackout, and the person speaking is in sort of a spotlight. This gives time for the person playing Patrick to come on the stage and be at the bottom of the stairs. And then the lights come up and it's like, a body. And the audience, ha ha ha. And the joke was that each woman comes in to the room discovering the body at separate times, and they all have very distinctive screams. Wah, ah, ah. And that's the joke. Now, this does make the first act longer, which we don't want. But if you do the first act clipping along at a pretty good pace and speeding it up at certain times and slowing it down, and even having characters interrupt each other and talking over each other in certain parts, that could be very interesting. You could make the investigator, Mr. Ruffing, very, irritated. He knows that someone is lying. He knows that maybe all of these women are lying. And you could make him a little more terse, a little more curt, a little more expedient with his reactions. They don't normally play it this way, but if you could shorten the first act, you can do some delicious stuff in the beginning. Also, in another version of the play, after talking to a friend who directed it, he didn't do as much as I did with all the I'm going to scream, you're going to scream. But his joke was they all discover the body, and it's lots of gasps. Very funny. And then none of them would remove the body. But the actor playing Patrick has to get off the stage. And so it was sort of like, there's no lines to support this. And I don't think you should make any lines. It was sort of like, well, I'm the mistress of the household, you're the servant, well, I'm just the cook. You pull it off. So the joke was, who's going to pull Patrick's dead body off the stage? And because they chose an actor who was quite tall to play Patrick, all 5 women had to pull him off the stage, and that was hilarious. I really enjoyed that. That's also a good idea. He also directed his first act at a brisk pace. He did a lot more interrupting than I did. I still think it was worth it because the audience really retained the information. And the exposition you get in the first act is just gone over as testimony in the second act, so it's not a waste if they didn't hear everything. But I believe they did. Okay? So you don't want people to leave at intermission because the first act is boring or tedious, which it can be when they don't leave the stage and no one enters the stage. He also put in women trying to leave the room. It wasn't exactly a locked room, but it was more about the inspector stopping them from leaving the room or other women stopping them from leaving the room. And that was very interesting and very funny. These little surprises were really good direction, really good blocking for the first act, because the second act takes care of itself. The mayhem is out of control funny. I also think because we've talked so much about Patrick, the victim, in the show, and you've established that you've seen him dead and pulled off or carried off by 5 women, as it were, that he needs to take a bow. And I really enjoyed this part. In my friend's version, which happened before mine, technically, because it was in another country, and I saw a video, the audience didn't get that the person bowing at the end was Patrick. And I realized, as we got on the phone after opening, like, what's wrong? I said, maybe they don't know it's Patrick. Of course they know. I'm like, well, they just saw a body at the bottom of the stairs that was male and women dragging him off. And that was the laughter. The women were the focus of the joke, not the victim or that actor's face. So they don't really know. Yes, he's in the same clothing. So, we decided just to make a sign. Huge laughter. He came out at the end, after everybody else bowed. Nervy. Naughty. And his sign said, I am Patrick, the victim. In big letter, a big sign. And the audience loved it. It was artificial, it was silly, But after the show, it was just brilliantly done. And he got big laughs and a big applause for the victim after everything. Best part of this story is the man playing Patrick was very good. He had never really gotten a part. Something about his schedule and his life in that area had never really allowed him to audition for a show where he was available for the whole run of the show. And now suddenly, due to changes in the pandemic and so forth, and his job now being online, he had all the time in the world, and he had to prove himself to this theater, and he did in this teeny tiny non-speaking part. And they love him, and he has great roles ever since. That's sort of a side note. Anyway, I think this is a wonderful show. This is a wonderful play. It's not done very much these days. I don't know why. Perhaps they don't think the name is interesting enough to attract people. Perhaps social media isn't picking up on what this show could be. Perhaps too many theaters have seen the reviews from other theaters saying, tedious, boring first act, no one leaves the stage. Make yours more interesting. This is a really well-written play. I don't think you need to jazz it up any further. I just think you need to get talented actors and really not be super precious about it. Like, every line is precious. We must have long pauses and lines said very slowly every time. People naturally interrupt each other. In investigations, people naturally interrupt each other. Was that what you really meant? What's going on? Also, the thing I'm not telling you is that the inspector, without trying, gets drunk. Wouldn't it be interesting if you saw Poirot or Sherlock Holmes drunk without him trying, just sort of unexpectedly? And wouldn't it be interesting if you played that role, or any of these roles, as a stereotype? What is drunk for this guy? Is he just weaving? Does he get the hiccups? Is it a combination of both? Does he go through his lines more rapidly? Does he forget some of his lines? It could be very interesting. Also, each character, each woman, I don't want you to think of as a stereotype or an archetype. Dolly the maid is terrified and not very bright. How old is she? Doesn't matter. That's interesting. What is terrified and not very bright together? Is she not very bright because she's terrified? What is the cook like? What is the Austrian maid like? If you don't think of any of them as stereotypes, and you give them, their characters are written really well, and if you don't play them as stereotypes at all, it could be far more interesting and have a lot more surprises for your audience, and that's what we want from this play. It's a good piece. Read the reviews. Ignore what they say about the first act. You can make yours better, and see if this play works for you. Murder mysteries sell, so this isn't the kind that they're expecting. Tell them that. And add in a dead body. It's a good idea, even if it is mine. All right. We'll talk again. I think this is a good piece. Everything's in the description. Come back for more. All right. Thanks.